Welcome back to College Football Addiction. We have our first playoff game of the 12-team playoff era completed. And though it looks a lot closer as a final score, the game was never in doubt. We're going to talk about it tonight or this morning whenever you're watching it. I think Notre Dame proved something absolutely massive here. We'll get to that in just a moment. The first thing I do want to talk about is the idea of college football games, playoff games on college campuses is phenomenal. It's one of the best things the powers that be in this sport, who very rarely get things right, it's one of the best things they've ever done. The pageantry of games being in home stadiums. Let me just tell you something. As a fan who has been to big games, I've been to top 5 matchups in Doak Campbell Stadium. I've been to top 10 matchups in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. I went to Alabama, Georgia this year. I've been to Clemson versus Notre Dame back when that was a big game in 2015-ish. I've been to Bama LSU. I've been to massive games. Nothing sucks more than neutral site football. Now, some exceptions. Games at the Rose Bowl, national championships, things like that, great. Games at neutral sites suck. And you can even feel it watching it at home. If any of you were at the game, please comment below and tell me about your experience. But man, just watching it at home, you could feel how different it was to have a game of this magnitude, a win or go home game at a home stadium. It was electric. I know the game. We'll talk about the game, but just that, I cannot wait for the other 3 games that we're going to get to see in this playoff. The game was absolutely drunk to start. A quick 3-and-out by Indiana, an interception that Notre Dame had after a tip. Rourke had a big pass down into scoring range, and then an interception in the end zone right ahead of the end zone, right after that. A 98-yard touch from Love, and the game is back and forth. Notre Dame had 3 possessions and had only run 3 plays when they took their first snap on their third possession. Notre Dame then goes up 14-0 after a nice drive. Indiana takes a field goal to make it 14-3. I wondered if that was the right decision, knowing that Notre Dame was about to get the ball twice. It worked out. It wasn't the only tough decision that Cignetti had to make. But I wondered if that 3 points was the right decision. Could getting 7 there have made a difference? Probably wouldn't have made a difference in the final result. Let's be very real. But I worried that giving Notre Dame the ball back with over 2 minutes to go and Notre Dame getting the second half kickoff could be the death blow. If Notre Dame was able to get 10 points out of that, which they only got 3 out of those 2 possessions, but if Notre Dame was able to get more points, that would have been Indiana's downfall. So I thought maybe you'd consider going for that. They didn't. Kicked the field goal. It worked out for them. The reverse on the kickoff return to start the second half, huge. A guy had the angle on Faison, just shook out of his shoes. They didn't end up scoring on that, but they did punt down inside the 15, a couple of sacks in that drive. Obviously, the concern around Mills was very real. It seemed like he was fine later. Field goal after they got pretty lucky on a fake and a timeout called by Indiana, made it 20-3. Jeremiah Love's stiff arm was a massive highlight in this game. Probably my favorite play of the game. Should have been tackled in the backfield. Massive stiff arm to not only get around the edge, but also pick up the first down. 20-3 at the end of the third. Obviously, you have the blocked field goal. Indiana punted the ball around the 50 with about 10:35 to go, down 3 scores. And just the simple math in my mind was if every Notre Dame drive takes about 2 minutes, right? Best case scenario, takes about 2 minutes. That means you're going to need to score 3 times in about 4.5 minutes. Now, timeouts, 2-minute warning, things like that might have impacted that a little bit. But when I just thought about the math there, I really think Indiana should have just gone for that. Notre Dame ended up scoring a touchdown after that anyway. You had the huge throw down to the 1 to face on the keeper by Riley to make it 27-3. And man, it's hard for me to think that they shouldn't have gone there. I know it was 4th and 12. I know that puts them in a really tough position if you miss, but just the simple math was If Notre Dame has the ball for 2 minutes on 3 drives, which you're going to need 3 scores, that would waste 6 minutes of clock. And then Notre Dame ended up wasting 6 minutes of clock just about when they went up 27-3. Indiana had a touchdown late to make it look a little bit better. It seemed like a garbage time touchdown, but then an onside kick, they get the ball back. Another touchdown, beautiful back shoulder throw with 25 seconds left, and you're like, well, 2-pointer coming here. What could happen? Obviously, 2-pointer broken up. Final score, 27-17. 2 things can be true at once, and I'm going to do another video on this. I'm going to try to not get sidetracked. I'm going to try to not steer away from what I want to talk about. I want to talk about Notre Dame tonight. I want to talk about my thoughts on them. But I understand the narrative right now of why did Indiana get in the playoff? We told you they didn't deserve. I'm going to save that for another video, and that'll probably come out on Monday morning. So make sure you're subscribed and you don't miss it, because I want to push back on that a little bit. I'm just not going to do it tonight, because I do think you should talk about Notre Dame when Notre Dame's the team that won. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow morning. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on around the holidays, but we'll see what happens. 2 things can be true at once right now. Notre Dame is a really good team, and Indiana was probably overrated like we thought they might be. In their 2 big matchups, this has now happened twice, where they're just not able to compete with teams that have this much more talent than they have. Now, again, I'm not going to get sidetracked. I still think Indiana deserved to be in the playoff. I think 11-1 in your conference, you deserve to get in. You might disagree with that. You might think that some other team that lost to Vandy or scored 3 points in Oklahoma or lost 3 games in another conference, you might think other teams deserve to get in, and that's fine. I disagree with you, and I'm going to do a video on that later. But I do think that both things can be true. Notre Dame's really good, and Indiana's probably overrated like we thought. Notre Dame really wasn't challenged in this game. I thought they played incredibly well. I thought their secondary played incredibly well. I thought their defensive line was after Rourke all night. I thought they looked really, really good. The defense is every bit as good as I thought. When I came on here and we previewed this thing and we talked about it and we asked Joe DeLeon of Ruffino and Joe about it, my big sticking point was that this defense would carry Notre Dame through this game. What happens in the future? I don't know. We'll talk about that in a sec. But I think this defense is the difference. What else? Jeremiah Love is just as good as I thought. That 98-yard run, the hurdle that was completely unnecessary that he kind of got banged up on a bit, the stiff arm, the way that he caught the ball out of the backfield. He is every bit as good as I thought. I think you've got the 3 best running backs in the country playing in this playoff. Genty, Love, Sampson. That's no slight at anybody else. I'm not trying to say that anybody else isn't great. Smith is probably up there pretty high too. I think he's probably the best in the ACC. But Love is just as good as I thought he was. I thought Leonard played really well. I thought he avoided pressure well. The dime to Faison late, using his legs, not only on that play, but on all plays. His spin out of things over and over and over again. It felt like he was spinning the wrong way, but every time he got out of it and did a good job of limiting the times that he was hit, limiting the times that he lost yardage. He did a great job of getting rid of the ball, and he didn't have an overwhelming stat line by any means. Obviously, the long pass late certainly helps him, but it wasn't overwhelming. At one point, I think he had 120-ish yards and 14 completions. He wasn't lighting it up by any means, but he was doing what he needed to do to move the ball and score when the opportunities arose. I thought he played pretty well. I thought he avoided disaster, and I thought he certainly was a good piece for Notre Dame tonight. And when Leonard's giving you a plus play, the defense is playing out of their mind like they did. I understand at the end, you're playing a lot of prevent there. You just know that they're going to run out of time. I don't really hold any of the ending against them. I don't think any Notre Dame fans do either. You can let me know in the comments if any of that upset you. You knew you weren't going to lose it, right? Did it get a little closer than you'd like? Probably. You still covered the spread, and there were a couple of garbage time touchdowns where you probably took your foot off the gas with about 5 minutes to go. Probably a lesson to be learned there, but I don't think it was a big deal. I don't think it says much about the totality of this game. Next up, UGA in New Orleans. No Beck playing in that game. How does that game shake out? Well, we'll certainly preview it. We'll get on Graham Coffee, I'm sure, of Dog Central. We'll get Joe back from the Rufino and Joe show to talk about that. But based on what I saw tonight, and this is my biggest takeaway from the game, from the evening, from your first playoff game, Notre Dame can compete with anybody in this playoff. Notre Dame can absolutely win a national championship. Now, is that me telling you they will win it? Not yet. Is that me telling you that they're going to upset Georgia or beat Georgia based on whatever that spread comes out as? No, I'm not saying that. I'm not making a pick in that game. I'm still living off the high of this game, right? Need to come back down to earth. But my takeaway is that when they play their best and when Riley plays well enough to move you down the field, when Jeremiah Love is on like he is, when the defense is playing lights out, and you look at their path, you get to play a backup quarterback, you get to play probably Penn State, but if it's not Penn State, you're either playing SMU or Boise State. When you look at their path to the national championship game is not incredibly difficult. You do have to beat, first and foremost, the best program in college football right now in Georgia, but you get a backup to play them. You've got a Georgia that has not been overly impressive offensively. You've got a Georgia that leads the country in drops. You've got a Georgia that's got some real injury issues in the backfield, and obviously the leader of that being Carson Beck. And so you're getting the most beatable version of Georgia that we've seen in the last 5 years. Right? Is that fair? Is Georgia still a great team? Absolutely. I'm not burying them at all. I may end up picking them before that game ends up happening. But this is the most beatable Georgia team that we've seen in quite a while, maybe half a decade. And so that's a little bit easier for Notre Dame. You look at who they'd play in the semifinal, and that's certainly a winnable game for Notre Dame, no matter which of the three teams it is. A lot of people think it's going to be Penn State. We'll see how they play tomorrow night against SMU, or tomorrow afternoon against SMU. Today, if you're watching this in the morning. But I think this was a good sign for Notre Dame. They finally got that big monkey off their back. This is their biggest postseason win that I could tell since the 93 Cotton Bowl, the 94 Cotton Bowl, after the 93 season. For all the Notre Dame can't win the big game, folks, they did tonight. They did take care of business. This wasn't a 3-touchdown spread. This wasn't a game that they were supposed to win by 40. This was a touchdown spread, and they went out and took care of business. And again, this is a team that can absolutely make it to the national championship. And if they make it there, you never know what happens in 60 minutes. Shout out to Marcus Freeman. I thought the only thing that was weird tonight for me was that fake on fourth down. I think they got pretty fortunate that timeout was called. But still a pretty good night for him. I thought he had his guys ready. I thought he had them coached up. The moment wasn't too big. The spotlight wasn't too big. They weren't too nervous. They didn't overthink. They didn't overplay. They bounced back after a couple of things didn't go their way early. Indiana had all of the juice early, and they immediately bounced back and reeled off 27 out of the next 30 points to put the game away. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Again, if you were at this game, I do want to hear from you. I want to hear what it was like, the on-campus vibes. Are your fingers frozen? Were you able to be on Twitter during this thing? Were you able to check in with your phone, or was it just too cold? It looked freezing, but I got to watch from the comfort of my own home, and that was certainly something I enjoyed. And I cannot wait for these next 3 games. Notre Dame wins by 10. Game probably not even close to that close. They dominated the first 55 minutes of it. Indiana gets a couple scores in the last 5 to make it a little bit closer, a little bit more respectable. A good year for Indiana. We'll talk about them in another video. Again, wanted to focus Notre Dame mostly on this one. Talk about Indiana, whether or not they deserve to be in this thing later on. We appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in to College Football Addiction.